Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Nick Longo Show. I'm so excited to have you with us. And I am joined with a really awesome person. And she is here in the Archdiocese of Seattle with me. And she is originally, I believe, from the East Coast, just like I am as well. So welcome to the show, Megan Pepin. How are you doing today, Megan? How are you doing?
Hey, Nick, I'm doing great. Thanks. Living our best life here in the quarantined Pacific Northwest.
I know. And you're closer to Seattle than I am, where everything kind of broke out. And so you're kind of even more quarantined than I am probably right now. Is that right?
Oh, ground zero. I live in Kirkland, which has been on the map for Costco and now for COVID-19. So we're really excited to be in the very town where it started.
Oh my gosh. It's been a wild 3 months since this has all started. Your pastor, you told me, he was anointed somebody with COVID-19 and then was quarantined. So you've had this whole no mass, like no going to church thing for a little bit longer than anyone else probably, right?
I think we have. Yeah, I think we're going on like 3 full months of it. It was basically the same time as the whole diocese went. But we're going back this weekend, though. We have outdoor masses starting this weekend. So we're waiting anxiously for the email to let us know if we're allowed to come. It's all alphabetical. So the P is really getting me. My maiden name started with an E, and I was like, "Ugh, that would have been really nice. It would have been way higher on the list. Come on." Yeah.
What are we doing here? Oh my gosh. So you're the director of young adult ministry for the Archdiocese of Seattle. And it's been awesome having you here, by the way. I mean, you've been here how long now? Probably almost 2 years?
Yeah, almost 2 years. 2 years in the middle of June, I'll have been in this position, which is crazy. Feels like no time at all.
Yeah, it really does feel like no time. I've been out here in this diocese for 3 years now, and it has flown by. It's so sad now that I just announced on all my socials that I'm going to be moving out of this diocese. It's been a blessed time being with you guys, but it's going to be sad to leave for sure. But awesome to go back to my home diocese in Syracuse and work at my home parish. I receive my sacraments and everything. Like I had my first encounter with Christ. It's gonna be awesome. I'm pretty excited about that.
But I know.
I'll be missing you.
We're so sad, but so excited at the same time. It's always good when people get to go home. That's always the big thing.
I'll be taking a lot with me for sure from this diocese, but it's been awesome having you here for the past 2 years. I think you've been somebody who's been very, very cool and unique in terms of diocesan ministry, because a lot of times it's like you fight to like hear from the diocese, or you fight to kind of have a good relationship with the diocese. It's so unfortunate. I worked at the diocese when I started in my ministry career, if you want to call it that, but my calling in a ministry. First, I was at a diocese, and it was so sad, like that was kind of the relationship with the diocese. But you've been somebody consistently since you've gotten here. You have been so good about reaching out to the parishes. And it's been such a really cool blessing to be able to work with you, to learn from you, just to hear from you so regularly. Like that's, in my experience with diocese, it's just hard to do. It's just hard to make that relationship real. So I really appreciate that. Since you've been here, what's like that stemmed from in you? Before we zoom out, I want to hear more about your life, but I just want to hear that first, because it's just such an awesome thing that you've brought to this diocese. So thank you, first of all.
Thank you, Nick. You have no idea how meaningful that is to me, because I feel so far away from almost everyone in the diocese, because we live, what is it, like 3 hours apart. And so you're probably the furthest person from me, truly, but feeling like you don't have that kind of connection. And I'm such a people person. That's what that stems from. I just I love people. I want to know who you are. I want to know what's going on in your life, as well as be able to help you in ministry. And I don't, like, for the most part, I think there's not a lot that I can teach people. It's more about supporting them in what they need from the diocese, right? And if that's my role, is really like, how Pope Francis and all the popes say, like, they're the servant of the servants of God, right? He's the lowest servant, even though he's the highest one. I feel like that's how it works as you go up in the hierarchy of the church, and that's how I see us in the chancery, as being servants of the people in the parish, because you're on the front lines. You're doing all of the work every day in and day out with the youth and young adults, and we just get the opportunity to serve you all, and it's a great honor to be able to do that.
That's awesome. So let's zoom back out and let's see kind of the 360 picture of who is Megan Elliott Pepin, and what got you into your faith in the first place, and kind of what brought you to this point now where you're here in the Archdiocese.
Yeah, great question. So you mentioned, I grew up on the East Coast. I'm from Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. If anyone's ever heard of it, it's where the Amish are pretty famous.
Nice.
And so I grew up Catholic. My family's very Catholic, and went to church every Sunday. And we definitely had a relationship with the church. I wouldn't say I had a relationship with Christ from a very early age, but definitely through my high school friends who were really strong Christians, I learned what it was like that you could have a relationship with Christ. And so figuring out that existed. And then when I got to college, I went to the University of Pittsburgh and was approached pretty much immediately by a gal who invited me to her Bible study. And I was like, that sounds cool. I'd like to, get to know more about the Catholic faith. And then from there, my eyes were just opened to this huge possibility of not only having a relationship with Christ, but also being able to go so deep into my faith. I'd never had that opportunity before. So it turns out that was a Bible study led by a gal who was in discipleship with Focus. So it was kind of a few steps away from the missionaries, but I definitely got acquainted with Focus in college and got really involved in leading Bible studies and mentoring others and figuring out what that looked like in my life. So then when it came time to graduate, I was like, okay, well, there's a couple of options before me. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I felt the Lord asking me just to throw my name in the hat, or my hat in the ring for Focus, and see what came about. And so I did. And if you're not familiar with Focus, it's a fellowship of Catholic university students, and they send pretty much recent college grads right back to a college campus to be missionaries and to serve the students there. And so the Lord put a big old yes on my heart, and it was crazy. I truly there have been 2 times in my life that I felt that strongly that the Lord was calling me to something. It was to Focus, and it was to marry my husband. So, I mean, those are 2 pretty big,
those are pretty big options. Yeah, I would say so.
Vocational path. Because I truly think that if I hadn't answered that call to be a missionary, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have had the formation nor the experience of taking a leap of faith. I think that was the biggest thing that I really experienced, was throwing it all into God's hands and saying, okay, Lord, you got to do this for me, because I don't know how to do this. You've got to open these doors. Yeah. You've got to help me figure out what this looks like. So that really kind of transformed my faith life. And then many winding paths have led me to where I am right now.
It's wild. I love Focus. We just went together to the SLS Conference. We had a huge group. How many people from our Archdiocese went?
10 of us from as young adults, and then there were 60 college students and all their missionaries. It was awesome. It was
awesome to see that much of us go down there. That was a great conference. It was so cool to learn more about the model of ministry that Focus that they do. I mean, Win, Build, Send has always influenced me. We talked a lot about that when you first kind of got here, and we chatted about just different things I was doing down here. And I think we lost you here. Oh, you're back. There we go. But we talked about Win, Build. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, you're back. We're back and rolling. Happens. So we talked a lot about Win, Build, Send all the time. And I just love that model. And I think that it's so... What's great about that model is so clear for people, right? You can know, or you can tell a person that you're discipling. You can talk with them. Where are you on the process? Do you need to be won over for Christ? Or you can kind of just tell, if a person needs to be won over for Christ, right? And then do you need to be built up? Do you feel called to be sent out and to serve, right? And I think it's such a smart and wise way to think about ministry, because I think sometimes when you look at any parish or any church or anyone going through the discipleship process, we can get confused. What the heck does it mean to be a disciple? I mean, really think about, Megan, when you first became a Catholic or Christian or anything, right? When you just first actually started living your faith, when someone was go be a disciple, that's a loaded word.
Right. You're what does that mean?
What does that even mean? And so I think it's so cool that, ministries like Focus have kind of done the work for us and kind of like put these models together so we can tell people like this is a really effective way of ministry. We have to win people for Christ. We have to build people for Christ. We have to send them out for him as well. I love that. And that was so impactful to be at that conference and learn a lot about that. How has that model of ministry like affected your path?
Yeah, I think you named it right there. Is it gives him clarity. I think it also, though, it really helped to open up my heart to be to want to reach every soul for Christ, right? Like it was through learning about what it meant to be a disciple of Christ, to know like that it means to be covered in the dust of your master, right? To follow so closely that you're actually like covered in his dust. And to know that I wanted everyone that I met to have that same experience of Jesus that I had. And so for me to mentor someone else was not necessarily for me to be able to teach them anything, but just to open up my own, kind of give them a little window into what God has done in my life, so that then hopefully that will open up the opportunity for them to receive from the Lord as well. And so I think in some ways the model can be a little bit like abrasive when you first hear it. You're like, well, I'm not winning anybody to myself, right? Like it's like it feels like, oh shoot, like I have to win them to myself. No, it's you do, you naturally like build friendships with people and you have these relationships. But in some ways, like especially outside of the model on college campuses, in the parish and in the real world, it really looks like having authentic relationships with people. And I think that's what we hunger for the most. And I've just been so blessed to, in the diocese, to be able to get to know so many different people and to build these friendships, especially people cross-culturally, cross like background, cross every kind of thing you can imagine, like being able to just meet them and have the uniting factor of being in love with Christ and wanting to make him known in the world, and being able to start from there has just been so beautiful and unifying. And seeing how many people are already built up and so ready to run and so ready to be on mission for the Lord has been really cool.
That's awesome. That's so cool. What did you say? You mentioned kind of authentic friendship. It made me think of Curtis Martin's most recent book, Making Missionary Disciples. And he talks about, what were the three? He talks about three different things. It's like authentic friendship,
divine intimacy, and being kind of sold on the idea of spiritual multiplication, the idea that we as disciples are able to invest in a few, and then they can each invest in a few, and we can change the world through that simple spiritual multiplication. Yeah.
I love that. And I don't know if it was him or if it was Everett Fritz who shared this story about spiritual multiplication. See, I can't, if you've ever seen anything I've ever done, I can't say many words. But spiritual multiplication, I don't know who said this, but they were telling the story about this guy in Poland who the Nazis were coming in, they were closing down all the churches, and they wanted to figure out, how do we still disciple the youth of the parish, but especially the men of the parish. And this one guy said, I could do it, but I can only take 5 men that I can disciple. And all he knew what to do was to pray the rosary and teach him the rosary and teach him what he really loved reading, which was St. John of the Cross. And so he took these 5 guys under his wing. He prayed the rosary with them, and he taught them about the mysteries of the rosary. He read St. John of the Cross with them and prayed with St. John of the Cross, and just really dove into that type of formation with these 5 men. And then lo and behold, years later, one of these guys ends up doing his doctorate in the writings of St. John of the Cross and, happens to be a guy named Karol Wojtyła and becomes Pope John Paul II. And it's just, that is so true. Like that idea of spiritual multiplication, it works, right? This guy said, all I can do right now is 5 guys. Of course, he's going through a crazy time of World War II and everything that's going on during that time. Right now, maybe we can relate to that, right? We're going through this crazy pandemic. Maybe all you can do is disciple 5 people or even just 1 person. I think sometimes when we think about discipleship or ministry or evangelization, we get overwhelmed because we think, oh my gosh, I need to go be the Archdiocesan Director of Young Adult Ministry. I need to go be the Director of Youth Ministry and Evangelization for a parish. It's like, no, actually, how about you just think about one person? That's like what you and I, like what we have to do in our roles just needs to be encouraging people to know just that, just one person. Can you just walk with one person and pray with them? And maybe over time you might get somebody like Carol Wojtyła to just end up being a rock solid saint, you know. That's the hope. Wouldn't that be cool? Oh my gosh, that guy, like I think his cause is open for canonization. I don't know what his name is, but go look it up, people.
Yes.
Oh, you know.
I don't know.
Jan
he has a very long Polish last name, and I would probably butcher it if I tried it. But
I think if you have a very long Polish name that starts with Jan, you're already a saint. Like, you win. That's such a. Yes. It's so cool.
I love that story.
I do. I love it. It's just so. What's so fitting is because you think about these saints like Saint John Paul II, you know, and you think that they just like appeared. And like they just happened. But like there's so many people that went into forming those people who it might have just been like sitting down and praying a rosary. And that's really what it means to make a saint. Like, why don't you just go sit and pray a rosary right now? And that's your first step towards sainthood. You know, it's not as hard as like, I don't know, whatever you're thinking. It might be as hard as it's not maybe that hard. Right. I don't know.
No, I love that. And I love that it's just like, it's a simple invitation most of the time. And I think we totally downplay the impact that a simple invitation can make in someone's life, to be able to say, hey, Nick, like, would you want to come pray a rosary with me? Like, I'm doing this on my own, and like, private devotion is obviously so important. Our own relationship with Christ has to be first and foremost. But to be able to say, I think that's the heart of evangelization, is to invite people in and to say, here, this is what I'm doing. Would you like to join me? And, oh, why am I doing it? Oh, this is why I'm doing it. Oh, I don't actually know the answer to that question. Let's go find it in the catechism or find it in the scripture and figure out what this looks like. Because I think everyone assumes that if in order to evangelize, we have to have all of the answers. And like, don't tell anyone. I don't have any degrees in theology. I don't have any like formal education in this. I have practical experience, pastoral experience, and also like the, you know, desire to serve the Lord. And so that's where, I guess that's what makes me qualified to do this role. But it also helps me to say, you know, you don't have to have a theology degree to make this happen. It's simply like living your life. But it's also, it's more than living our lives. I think that's also, it's like you can go one way to feel like you have to be an expert, but go the other way and say, well, like, you know, I'll just live my life and not, you know, I don't have to explicitly share things. Well, in some ways, I think we do have to live our lives in light of the gospel, right? Like, we always hear that phrase, like, you know, preach the gospel at all times, but, you know, if necessary, use words. I think we have to use words. I think we have to let people know that Christ is alive and that he, you know, he lives in the church, he lives in each one of us, and he desires a relationship with each one of us. But we have to do it in a way, in a language that people will understand. So making sure that we understand a person before we try and, you know, speak a foreign language to them, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these different elements to evangelization that have to come together, but joyfully living our faith is a huge part of it, and inviting people into it.
For sure. And like you said, you don't have to be qualified. I love that little saying, it's God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And in my experience, also not having degrees, right, I have felt that so much. I remember it was like a few months ago, I had a friend of mine who I had mentored and discipled on a retreat back in college. And he's a little bit younger than me, but anyways, he was leaving broadcasting, coming back and doing ministry, but had no background in ministry. So he called his family and said, how do you be successful in ministry when you have no background in ministry, you have no background in the church, you have no background in theology? What do you do? And I said, stop worrying about that. That's what you do. That's how you be successful. Like, you be successful in ministry by worrying about your prayer life and living your prayer life out, and actually taking action on your prayer. And I think that's one of the most important points about like prayer that I've ever given to people, was living out your actual prayer life. And that doesn't just mean like, I think sometimes people treat prayer like if you ever watch Star Wars, I'm a big Star Wars fan. Sometimes people treat the Force like it's just like this magic thing that people are going to like. I don't know if you've seen the scene, the first episode of the new trilogy. Finn looks back at Han Solo and is like, oh, we're going to go save him. And then he's like, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to go save him? And he's like, oh, we'll just use the Force. And then Han Solo's like, that's not how the Force works. What the heck are you thinking? And I think people treat prayer like that. Like, oh, we're just going to pray about it. But like, no, you have to actually take action on your prayer and live that out. And I think it's so important. How have you lived prayer in your life?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm still processing the Star Wars reference, I think.
I know, you're right.
living prayer in my life. Oh gosh, in some ways, I think the main thing, and I always talk about this, and I have yet to make a repetitive habit of it, which I need to work on, but is actually like praying for people intentionally. I think that to me, that's the biggest way that prayer comes into our life, because when we pray for someone, not only are we praying for them, and that's, you know, efficacious to their sanctity and to their growing in virtue and growing in holiness, and also for whatever we're praying for, but it's also changing us at the same time, because it changes our heart and softens our heart towards someone. And so oftentimes I find that that's the best way to make my faith active and make my prayer active, is praying for other people, because then when I offer them up to the Lord can give me insight into what it is that they might need at this moment. If they need an encouraging text, which is basically all we can do right now, or a phone call or whatever, or, right, you know, in regular times, like a coffee date or a time to talk, or just even just like a quick hello, to be able to say like, I'm with you and the Lord is with you. And I want to remind you of that. But also, like in my vocation as, you know, a wife, and, you know, to my husband, like trying to figure out what it looks like to love him right now. And that's the biggest thing I think that all of us are dealing with in this quarantine, is trying to figure out how to love our families well, and how to not just be upset with being stuck inside with them all of the time, and figuring out what it looks like to live our prayer in that way. And for me, that's been the biggest challenge, has been like, you know, my whole life is my work, my role, my mission is like outward facing, but now we're being asked to turn inward and say, okay, like get your own house in order and make sure that you're loving your family well. So praying for my husband every day, and praying for his holiness, and praying for us to be able to grow together every day has been something that I've been really trying to do, and trying to live that a little bit better. I mean, it's incremental. If even a little bit better every day, it may not even be better. It may be like one step forward, two steps back, but it's trying, and it's opening ourselves up to God to ask him for the grace to be able to do that.
That's awesome. How has this quarantine been for you? I mean, this has transformed a lot of the ways, I mean, all the ways really, that we look at church and our ministries, and everything is going online. How has that been for you, going to, you know, an online mass, and, you know, attending, right? Whatever you want to call it. Doing Zoom ministries has been something I've been doing, right? Like doing virtual youth groups and those types of things. We did online theology on taps, right? What has that been like for you to experience this? It's so, I mean, for me, it's been really strange. It's been so strange. I've loved it because obviously, like, clearly I like this type of stuff, and it's exciting, but it has been extremely strange, and I definitely want to get back to face-to-face.
Gosh, I know. I'm eager for that too. A friend of mine said it so well yesterday. We were chatting, and she was like, you know, like, extroverted me really like doesn't understand how it is possible that I can be drained by being on Zoom, because I'm in person with people, right?
Oh,
but I'm
so
the
true.
same way. Yeah, you feel so drained. And so I think for me, Livestream Mass and Livestream ministry has been interesting, because we live 2 blocks from our parish, and so I can literally orient myself to where Jesus in the Eucharist is being made present in the Mass, but I can't be there. So it's very interesting. So Mass has been challenging, but honestly, ministry, this has opened up a whole new realm for me, especially, like I said at the beginning, like feeling so far away from most of the young adults and young adult ministers throughout the Archdiocese, because we have such a big diocese. This has been a great opportunity to just like lean into the fact that we have this technology and we can actually be together without being together. We did an event last night, and there's someone from California, someone from Oregon that called in, and, you know, just like opening up the door to be able to minister to people far and wide. We've done retreats online. We've done a couple of just talks and events, just workshops, like trying to, and you have the same, in some ways, interaction. It's different, obviously, through the screen, but you can still interact with people. You can still share your thoughts. So in some ways, I think it's been really insightful for me and my ministry, but also for like the whole church, and being able to say, yes, people are, their lives are changed through live stream mass. That's like a proven fact at this point. And so for all these parishes to say, we think we want to keep going with this, and we think this is really useful in evangelization. And I think in some ways at first it felt like such a burden. Everything was such a burden because we were all just getting our equipment ready and getting everything going. And at the parish level, I'm sure it was even worse than for us at the chancery. But at the same time, now we can see it as such an opportunity for growth and continued ministry. Yeah.
So true. When everything started, especially I think a lot of people like you and I who are maybe the millennials working in the church who have maybe some more experience, maybe not, but maybe some more experience with technology and things like this. Hard to say. But it was so busy, and I just was figuring out everything, so much, 3 a.m. nights of just research and research on how do I make this live stream good for our people. Yeah. And then finagling 3 random cameras somehow into my computer so we could do different angles at mass to kind of get people a little bit more connected in, which was fun, and we adapted and adjusted over time, but it was crazy chaos. And I'm still when you're talking about growth for the future, it's gonna be so cool. At my parish, we just invested a ton of money into serving our parishioners through this live streaming mass service. In the future, going forward, we're waiting for Megan to come back. She'll be back here shortly, but it's going to be awesome because we did not have this before. We didn't do much with social media before, and now we're going to be doing so much more to be able to serve people in that way. So I'm super excited about it. Megan, I don't know. Can you? Is your audio working?
Yeah, the audio I think is here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So we'll go just on me, and then it'll be like I'm doing radio again. I've done this before. It's just fun.
I love it. And I was trying to figure out my camera.
Hey, it's cool. I like it. So, with that said, all this new social media content that a lot of parishes, more than just mine, are just going to be probably putting out there. It's presenting so much content, which there was a lot of content in the Catholic world already, but now there's going to be a lot more content online that people can go and they can watch and they can consume it and benefit from it. But what do you think about all that? Because I definitely have some thoughts about it, because I feel there's so much great content out there to be fed by, which is fantastic. But I said this to a friend the other day. I said, we can go and we can be fed by all this content that's online, and we can just keep saying oh my gosh, I just need to be fed it some more. But then at some point it becomes consumeristic and it becomes religitainment. That's a word that the deacon at my parish always uses, and I love it. Religitainment. Religitainment. Yeah. It's not my phrase. It's coined by Deacon Adolfo at my parish, and I love it because it's kind of, it's sometimes that's true. Sometimes we can kind of fall into this, being entertained by oh my gosh, that talk at SLS was so good, or wow, that Steubenville talk was so good, or that homily was fantastic, and that's all we're going for. But what we really need is actually the Eucharist. It's how have you felt about that dichotomy that's presenting itself?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of had forgotten. This is embarrassing that I would have forgotten this, but I forgot that it was not required that we attend live stream masses. I kind of forgot that there was obviously this dispensation. There still is a dispensation to not attend mass, obviously, because we're not allowed to. But at the beginning, I was like, what? People aren't going to live stream mass?
But we're waiting.
What is?
We're waiting. There is a dispensation in our diocese, so you're not required to attend live stream mass. Okay,
definitely
now
not.
You're back.
Definitely not. Sorry. No. Definitely not required to attend live stream mass. And so, but in my mind, I was like, but why aren't people going to live stream mass, right? Why aren't we staying connected to our parishes? But I think it is part of that you just mentioned, that I can't remember the phrase you used,
religitainment. Yeah,
I think it's partly that, and partly just the total disconnect between community and your faith, right? And so many people, that is just what they do every Sunday. You go to mass, you go with your family. There's this sense of community that comes. But I think in some ways this has been a tipping point for people, right? We're either going to jump all in, or we're going to kind of fall back out of being Catholic.
It's true.
with these live stream services. But it's been cool to see people connecting in different ways to all these virtual resources, but also reconnecting with what the Mass actually is, so that it's,
Right.
I feel like, especially with this new year of the Eucharist that Archbishop Aitchen is starting
I was going to
very
say,
soon, it's
so wise.
timely, so
It's
beautiful, right?
Yes, it's so wise. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not a better, it's so wise. It's just not, there's nothing better than, it's so smart. Good job. Claps all around for that.
Praise God for the Holy Spirit inspiring Archbishop. Yeah. And in some ways, my first thought was like, oh no, like we're not receiving the Eucharist right now. Like, how can we have this and how can this be legitimate? But in some ways, I think the Northwest Catholic article said it best. Like, we're fasting in order that we may feast and in order that we may understand the goodness that we haven't had for a little while and be able to dive right back into it.
Mic drops right there. I love it.
Beautiful.
We're fasting so that we might feast later, because that is awesome. I love it. It's so smart because it's been so hard, and I've been really blessed to be able to live stream these masses. So I've been able to receive the Eucharist. So praise God for that. It's been awesome, but it has been hard for even me in that, because it's just live streaming a Mass is so different than actually just going there and praying and worshiping. Like, because now I'm responsible for, I have to watch the audio mixer and make sure that the audio is getting out there to people who are attending online. I have to make sure the cameras are okay, all these different things, switching camera angles, all this. It's just crazy and chaotic for me to be able to still dive in and actually receive well. That's been really, really difficult. So when they announced this, I was so happy, because it's just another, it's just another check. Cause like you said, it's hard because right now we're not receiving the Eucharist. So to even have the right perspective on what does it mean to be Eucharistically centered, right? We need to be focused on Jesus, first and foremost. And I think that's one of the period. Yeah, exactly. That's it, that's it. And so it's so wise, I think, that in this time, especially, that's the call of Archbishop. So smart. I'm pumped.
Beautiful. I am too. I think it'll be really beautiful, especially, I know there's a lot of plans for the next year, and, hopefully some of these things will be back in person, but to remember that Eucharist means Thanksgiving, and that we are gathering literally to give thanks for this gift that God has given us in Jesus, his son, and in the Eucharist that we get to participate in. And whether we participate in person or not in person, someone mentioned to me the other day the idea that we have to remember that the grace of the Eucharist that we've received, even if it was 3 months ago, is still active in our lives. That it's not just, we receive him and then in 24 hours it's gone. It's like, God doesn't work that way. He doesn't work in our own little minuscule versions of what he's doing. He's actually constantly working, constantly renewing that grace within us. So to lean into that and to take heart that he is never abandoning us in this time. And spiritual communion is real. And it's not just a sweet little caveat that we put in because we have to do virtual masses. It's real. It's been a part of our tradition for forever. And so maybe not forever, but for a long time. And so just remembering that the grace, God is not restricted by the sacraments. He uses the sacraments to impart his grace, but he is not limited to them, and that he can act in any way he wants to bring grace into our lives.
For sure. I think another thing that this has done, this whole experience, has really, I think, empowered a lot of the laity, a lot of the people who are not, those who are members of the clergy that are serving at masses and stuff. I think sometimes, especially as Catholics, we will look to them so much, and we should look to them as models of holiness and helping us in our faith. Right? We should look to them, but we too are called to the same high standard of holiness that all of our priests and deacons and bishops and popes are called to, right? We're all called to live holiness the same way for Christ. And I think this has really empowered us during this time to say, I really need to live my faith, because like you said earlier, right? It's about loving your family in your home. And that's what we can do right now. So that's what we can do right now, really fast and immediate, right? Love your family in your home. How has that been for you? Just, back there with your husband? being in quarantine? What's that been like?
Oh man, I mean, yeah, we had our own growing pains of working from home and being kind of trapped here for a little while, and being far from family too makes it even more challenging. We have a baby niece who we haven't met because we weren't able to
Yeah,
travel to be able to meet her, and so
it's
there's things
hard.
like that. But yeah, but Zoom and all these things have made it so nice to be able. We actually connect with our families way more than we ever did. But for us, I think it's just been a balancing act of learning once again. I mean, anyone who is married or lives in community or has roommates knows that it's all about communication and it's all about
Yep.
expectations, right? And what expectations you have for your life and your day. And so we've just, been figuring out the balance of working together alongside each other, working me coming to the living room so that he's not bothered by the fact that I'm on a call right now, and figuring out
Right.
how to get outside. But in some ways we've been renewed in our sense of unity as a married couple. And we've just started recently doing family meetings on Sundays, which is really beautiful. So after
Yes.
we watch Mass, we have a little meeting where we get to talk about our goals for the week and our goals for the month, and being, more intentional about that kind of time, investing that kind of time in our relationship and in our family has been pivotal for us. And it
I
makes
love
us feel
it.
so much more united. So we would never have done
That,
that if we weren't in quarantine, right? I mean, who has time for
yeah,
a weekly
right.
family meeting when you're not in quarantine? So
I,
I'm hopeful we
yeah,
can
right.
continue it.
I love that. How do you guys go about planning? Do you guys like journal and like write things down, or what's your system?
Oh man, this could be a whole nother podcast. We have some friends who gave a series on Pat Lencioni's book, 3 Questions for a Frantic Family. So we can
Yes.
connect you with them if you want. But yeah, so they gave, one talk on how to create a mission statement, one talk on how to create like short-term goals, like 2 to 6 month goals, and then one on how to have your weekly meeting. And so we
Yeah.
use kind of a formula that they put together, but basically just, have our kind of family mission statement in mind, have our goals in mind for the 2 to 6 months, and evaluate each week how we're doing on them, which is huge.
Yeah.
And then yeah, anything that's going on in the week. But it surfaced a lot of things that, calendaring issues, or things that, in a business you would take care of
Right.
the calendar and you would make sure someone's on top of it. But sometimes in a family you kind of forget that that's something you have to do too, and to
Yeah.
maintain sanity as you go through the day. So what
Have
do we
you
have on
read
the
that
calendar
book?
is no question. We have it on the shelf. It's actually holding up my phone right now. We haven't we
Nice.
haven't read it quite yet, but
I
we
want to
are
read that
hopeful
too.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Christina working with Chris Vanek at Real Life Catholic. She just did a series with him. You should go check it out if you haven't, people. It's called The Life You Were Made For. It's on EWTN and a bunch of stuff. And my wife helped with
Nice.
it. And Pat Lencioni was one of the guests. And that man,
Oh,
first of
cool.
all, is so cool and super smart, like,
Mm-hmm.
and just so down to earth and very nice, just a very nice person. I never talked to him. My wife did, but I could overhear the conversation because
Sure.
with
Oh,
all of
yeah.
those guests, I was like on the other side of the computer, basically like,
Yep.
this is so cool. Right. And yeah, he talked about that book and I'm dying to read it. That sounds so good.
Yeah, definitely worth looking into.
Speaking of which, Megan, I always ask everybody, what are some books that you would give to the listeners that you would say, read this right now? It would be beneficial to your life.
Oh man. Well, I just finished rereading the Lord of the Rings series trilogy, and
So
then
good.
watching the movies. And so, if you have time, and if you've never read it, I would say go for it and do some digging ahead of time. I think for me, I read them as a kid and couldn't even get through all 3 of them because I was like so bored by the end. But then as a grown up and hearing all of the Catholic references that are in there, especially as Christians and Catholics, hearing how J.R.R. Tolkien really weaves in these beautiful elements of the faith into these books, it really gave
cool.
me a new sense of how beautiful they are, and just how insightful they can be into the human experience, into our faith life. So for sure, I would go for those, and I could talk another whole podcast about what I love about them. And my husband is like dying because he's like, "You are such a Lord of the Rings nerd." I'm like watching all the Stephen Colbert little references to Lord of the Rings, and I'm not quite to that level. I don't have the trivia knowledge for that, but I love the elements of it. So those were really beautiful. I also just read Sister Miriam James Heidland's book called Loved as I Am, which is just a beautiful story. She weaves in so many elements.
The yellow, it's like yellow or orange on the cover or something.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm looking at it right. Yeah, it's yellow. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's, weaves in her testimony into a lot of elements of beautiful calls to conversion and calls for really true relationship with God and with him as our Father, as Jesus, our Savior, and as the Holy Spirit. She really does a beautiful job of weaving those elements together. And I actually have to read it again. I tend to read books too quickly, and then I forget most of what was said. And so I need to go back and read it again. But definitely, I would recommend that one. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Megan, are you like a margin writer, or like do you write in your books at all? There's this like very controversial topic.
I know. I used to be. I was an English major in college, and so I had
Me
to write
too
things.
once.
And yeah, right. And so you have to write everything. But since college, actually, and since in the last couple of years, I've stopped doing it. I tend to just write quotes in my journal if I like want to remember them or something. But I actually just started reading The Diary of St. Faustina is another book I'm reading with some friends, and I have to underline things in there or else I'll just completely forget because there's so much and it's so rich and dense that I just forget where I am if I don't underline. So I would say I'm a little bit of both. Mostly pencil though, if I'm going to do it. Yeah.
I would have never done this in a million years. I hated the idea of it, and I would really quietly judge people who did it when I was younger, if I'm being honest. Like that's who I was, like a perfectionist about my books. I love books, have lots of them, and I would like want them to be perfect. But then I became an English major for a period of time because I majored in everything at one point.
Okay, got it.
I was that guy in college. I had many majors. I majored in ESL once. I majored in so many things. But anyways, English was one of them. And I would like, because they had us annotate like so much. And so I would just start doing it in our books, and they would actually require for some things that we'd annotate the books. It was so interesting. I had a really interesting professor. He was brilliant. But anyways, so I started annotating. I started to really like it for certain things, but particularly I liked it with rereading. And so now I won't do it unless it's something that I know I'm like I really love this book. And so I'll reread the book. And then when I reread it, I'll annotate then, and then I'll go back and reread it again and be like, ooh, look at that. Why did I even write that? Or like, be like, wow, I was really smart right then when I wrote that. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. The friends I'm reading with this Diary of St. Faustina with, we were missionaries together, and we were just reflecting the other day about how wise we were when we were 22 and we knew everything and we thought we knew all the spiritual realities that there could be. And now we're like nearing 30 and we're like, we know nothing. What were we thinking? We know absolutely nothing. So that's helpful when you have annotations to remind you that you know nothing.
I've had those experiences very much. I love it. So Megan, you get to the end of your time here and you're dead, right? Okay, you die. Unfortunately, this is how I end every interview.
I wish you could see my face right now, because
I know,
that was a surprising part of the conversation.
Surprising twist. Oh my gosh, and now Megan's dead. Sorry. But hey, it's great because you're going to get a call from Pope Francis or whoever's Pope at the time. And they're going to say, hey, Megan, actually, you guys come down and you choose. You're going to be the patron saint of what? What would you choose?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. Oh, geez. Okay, let me think about this for a second. So
I've had many answers, and they have gone from David Calavita picking hummus to Edmund Mitchell picking the heart.
I love that. Okay, I think I would pick, this is aspirational. So let's say that this is actually in 50 years and I have become not only a great whatever I'm going to be in my life, but I'm also a good gardener. I really want to be a great gardener because I have a small garden now and I love it more than I can express to you. And so I would want to be the patron of gardening. Yeah.
I love it. That's so cool. Especially when I have a daughter who's named after the Garden of Eden. I appreciate that you want to be the patron saint of gardener. Gardeners or gardening?
Let's say gardening, because you can do gardening without necessarily being a gardener. I don't think I'm a gardener. I think I have some plants and I like to try and keep them alive. And I have, lots of aspirations around that.
That is awesome. I love it. Well, Megan, thank you so much for gardening and for planting the seeds in the Archdiocese of Seattle that we need here.
God. Thank you.
Like I said in the beginning, you've been somebody who's been you've just done so much to outreach to people here on the front lines in ministry, but I just know it. Like, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I'm certain that you're reaching out to just individuals too. And I know you're probably discipling people and have people alongside you that you're just really doing ministry with. So not only are you somebody who's just sitting in a position at the diocese, you are somebody who's actually in the field yourself too. And I know that you're a practitioner more than just somebody who's saying all these things about ministry, right? So it's something that's really cool to see at the diocesan level. So I just encourage you in that. I just want you to know that it's meant a lot these past 2 years that you've been here for you to be reaching out the way you do. You know, us being down here in Vancouver, sometimes we feel like we are so far away from the diocese, but you've made the diocese feel a lot closer to home. So I just want to thank you for that and your ministry.
You. Praise God.
And thank you so much for being here on the show. This has been fun.
This has been really fun. Yeah, sorry my video cut out, but we'll make it work.
We'll make it work. It works totally. What? Where can people find you? Online.
You can find the Archdiocese of Seattle Young Adult Ministry page is called Western Washington Catholic Young Adults. I think people get mixed up sometimes. We wanted it to encompass the whole diocese, and since the diocese is called Seattle, we wanted it to be a little bit beyond that. So yeah, Western Washington Catholic Young Adults, WWCatholicYA on Instagram, and and you can find us there and find out all the things that are going on in the ministry.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us and tuning in and hearing a lot about all the great things that Megan Pepin is doing in ministry at the Archdiocese of Seattle. God bless you all, and we'll see you on another episode of The Nick Longo Show.